Do you know what the outcome of this is? They're gonna go to federal prison. Federal prison.
In a sport as volatile and unpredictable as MMA, controversy is just part and parcel of the experience. But for today's video, we're going to highlight some moments that went a level beyond the norm, the scandals that truly stuck in the memory. Hey, and as always, if you guys enjoyed the video, please be sure to let us know by giving it a like and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a thing. Now, without further ado, and ranked in no particular order, here are 10 of the most controversial moments in UFC history. Brock Lesnar's UFC 200 appearance. You know, there's a lot of talk right now about how Conor McGregor is going to navigate the 6-month post-retirement period that requires all returning athletes to spend a half year in the USADA testing pool to be considered eligible to fight. Well, the UFC have certainly bent the rules in the past, most famously when UFC 200 needed an injection of star power. After Jon Jones versus Daniel Cormier 2 and Conor McGregor versus Nate Diaz 2 fell apart ahead of the landmark show, Dana and his team basically worked out an exemption for Brock Lesnar that would allow him to make a quick return to MMA without the waiting period.
I'm here, people. It's happening. I feel awesome. I'm here.
All in all, it looked like their move was a successful one, as Lesnar went on to sell many pay-per-views before beating Mark Hunt on the main card. Unfortunately, the moment was tarnished when it emerged that Brock had failed his post-fight drug test.
He failed the test for clomiphene.
He took estrogen blockers. The only reason that anybody takes estrogen blocker on purpose is to restart their testosterone after they do a steroid cycle.
They knew he was on the juice. He went in there loaded to the gills. Look at the size of his head. He's taking shit that makes your head grow. And Mark Hunt had every right to be mad.
The UFC, your shit. Well, let this piece of sticking needles in his ass and say, oh, let him cheat all the way to the bank. That and your shit company.
The UFC seemed to know what they were doing here. And while the fight's result was overturned to a no contest, the UFC 200 revenue remained in the promotion's pocket.
Well, let's get one thing clear. Brock Lesnar does what Brock Lesnar wants to do.
I'm a white boy and I'm jacked. Deal with it.
Towelgate. Daniel Cormier might not be known as a dirty fighter per se, but his antics at the UFC 210 pre-fight weigh-in were most certainly suspicious, to say the least. In fact, DC in recent years has all but admitted to doctoring the results of his weigh-ins prior to taking on Anthony Johnson in 2017.
I feel like right now is the time to be completely transparent. I think I may have grabbed the towel in Buffalo.
The burden of that lie, I don't lie. So having to carry a lie like that on my heart was too much. I'm an innocent guy, Habib.
So, what happened? Well, at first, it didn't look as though Cormier was going to make weight.
Cormier weighs in at 206.2 pounds.
But on the second attempt, out of nowhere, he suddenly burned off the necessary pounds.
And now Daniel Cormier is back and made weight. How did that happen?
Of course, fans quickly noticed that he had been leaning on the towel used to preserve his modesty, and so the infamous Towelgate was born.
That time with Rumble, did you push down on that towel?
What? Was there a towel?
If you focus on his hands, you can see him looking down, balancing out his weight just right to make 205. What a clever trick.
This seemed like there was a lot of people who thought that the towel was why you made weight.
What is doing that do? I don't understand. No, I just wanted to make sure I didn't show my junk. Something's wrong with the scale.
TJ Dillashaw's return. Say what you want about TJ Dillashaw, but that man is one of the most competitive people to ever set foot in an MMA cage. He's so competitive, in fact, that it's actually caused him to be a bit irresponsible at times. He bit off a bit more than he could chew in trying to cut down to 125 pounds and take Henry Cejudo's title, even using EPO, an illegal performance enhancer, to help him. And when his shoulder was basically hanging on by a thread after his camp to take on Aljamain Sterling for bantamweight gold, he still took the fight, refusing to pull out, banking on the minuscule chance that he might just win. So when TJ's shoulder gave out early, the fight boiled down to a massive waste of time for the fans, for Sterling, and a career-ending injury for Dillashaw himself.
This was a waste of everyone's time.
Yes.
Should this fight have even happened at all?
No, it shouldn't have.
I completely blew my shoulder out the end of April. Probably dislocated a good 20 times throughout training camp.
Were you aware that TJ Dillashaw had that shoulder injury leading up to the fight?
I had no idea. That's a problem. That's something that he should have told us.
I knew my shoulder was a little bit messed up because I had some weakness in it. Come to find out, I had a torn supraspinatus and infraspinatus in my shoulder. I feel like the body just kind of like breaking down and just got loose to where it actually popped out twice while I was in Abu Dhabi getting ready for the fight. Yeah, man, it was bad. It was bad.
Nick Diaz versus the Nevada State Athletic Commission. Nick Diaz is without question one of the most genuine figures in mixed martial arts. He's attracted a legion of fans to his cause simply by being himself, remaining totally unwilling to buy into the run-of-the-mill BS of the fight game. Unfortunately, when he managed to get himself in hot water with the Nevada State Athletic Commission for yet another marijuana violation, they tried to make an example of him, banning Diaz for 5 years and hitting him with a massive fine of $165,000 to go along with it.
Make a motion for then a 5-year suspension of this athlete, that he be financially penalized to the amount of 33% of his purse, which was $500,000. Is that correct, Mr. Eccles? Yes.
This commission and everybody, they've done everything they can to keep me from being all the way on top. I wanted to, just get up and tell them all, like, look, you guys are way the out of line. You guys have been trying to hold me down from day one. They can't beat me in a fight, so they pull me into their dork court, and then they're like, try to take all my money, and then just decide to point the finger at me like I'm the bad guy. They know it's wrong.
This was an insane punishment for a guy who had never tested positive for PEDs. In fact, most people who do test positive for PEDs wouldn't get a ban or a fine anywhere near this.
It's so unfair. If one person tests for steroids that could actually really hurt a person, another person smokes a plant that makes them happy, and he gets suspended for 5 years, whereas the guy that could have hurt someone so much that he could have died in there gets a slap on the wrist. It's not fair.
I think it was a completely arbitrary and capricious decision. We're not getting an impartial hearing. This isn't fair. This was a kangaroo court. The commissioner's decision was not based on the facts. It wasn't based on the evidence. One commissioner says, your attorneys were very persuasive, but you don't respect us. So here's a 5-year ban and a ton of money that we're going to take back.
He had no fair hearing. He wasn't going to get one. It was a preordained outcome.
So when the entire MMA world revolted at this news, they eventually dropped the fine to $100K and the suspension to 18 months. But Nick Diaz never truly forgave the fight game for this. They basically tried to end his career there and then. The relocation of UFC 232. Dana White's hypocrisy can occasionally show itself, and if there's money on the table or a bankable star in trouble, you better believe that he's going to do anything in his power to ensure that he can continue promoting them, even if it means rubbing some people the wrong way. Back in 2018, when Jon Jones failed yet another drug test ahead of UFC 232 in Vegas, Dana couldn't get his biggest drawing star cleared to fight.
We were informed earlier this week by the United States Anti-Doping Agency a urine sample collected from Jon Jones tested positive for a very, very small amount of a long-term metabolite. We took this information to the Nevada State Athletic Commission, and while I think they understood the issue, partly because the Christmas holiday here, didn't feel they had the time to fully vet this issue.
So what did he do? Well, just days out from this massive event, White basically screwed over the fans by moving the show from Vegas to California, messing up everyone's accommodation and travel plans just so he could keep Jon Jones on the card.
Dana, as I've been told, you have an update on the card this weekend scheduled for Las Vegas.
We're moving it from Las Vegas to the Forum in LA. There's not enough time for Nevada to do this, so we're moving the event to California, where that commission has already dealt with Jon Jones.
What about the other fighters on the card, Dana? How are they impacted by this? By no fault of their own, they're going to have to move their camp and their final preparations to Los Angeles, which is at best a 4-hour drive.
Well, we'll take care of that. We're going to make the transition as smooth as we possibly can.
It's a bit of a hassle for all of us. It pisses me off. I'm a bit disappointed it's going to cost all of us. I don't think it's going to cost Jon Jones much, but it'll cost us, cost my family a fair bit.
I think it was more of like an annoyance. I'm just like, really? For one person?
A lot of people are upset about accommodations that they had made with their family. It's definitely unfortunate that a product of one person, everything around Jon Jones, we all have to kind of pay for it.
Pretty shocking display. Charles Oliveira stripped of his title. On fight week, the final word from the scales is law. And though something was clearly off about the scales during the build-up to Charles Oliveira's title defense against Justin Gaethje, this scandal rocked the lightweight division to its core. Several fighters on the card hit numbers on the official scale that did not match their reading backstage. And so when the defending lightweight champion Charles Oliveira missed weight by a fraction of a pound,
155.5 for Charles Oliveira,
it was clear that something was up.
He got screwed. There was some shenanigans with the scale.
Many other people have stated that the scale was off, and a whole bunch of fighters said it was off by half of a pound.
Seemingly he was on weight last night. He was on weight in the back, and we're hearing rumblings on the ground that there were some scale recalibrations and some discrepancies.
He would weigh in, or he weighed in like the night before the weigh-ins. He was like, oh, I'm good to go. And then in the morning, he goes and shows up for the weight cut, and it's a pound plus off. The scale was off, and that's a fact.
But the UFC still opted to strip Do Bronx of his title, making his win over Justin Gaethje a non-title performance, which would have gone down as his second successful title defense. And unfortunate end to Charles Oliveira's title reign.
Can you give us your thoughts on this whole weight fiasco and him losing the belt and just, I guess, your
It's a nightmare. I mean, it's a nightmare. He didn't make weight. We have rules. He didn't make the weight. He doesn't, the belt is vacant. I'm sure in the minds of the media and fight fans, Oliveira is the champion. But technically, he's the #1 contender now.
TRT Vitor Belfort. There have been a lot of PED controversies in MMA history, and there are still many fighters in the UFC that are no doubt bending the rules. But the most public example of PED usage being tolerated came when the fearsome Vitor Belfort was granted an exception from the ban on TRT. This led to the aging middleweight entering a second prime, a prime he used to obliterate the likes of Dan Henderson, Luke Rockhold, and most notably Michael Bisping, that actually led to Bisping losing his eye.
Look at this, baby boys.
You know what I mean? When he was on TRT, he was a different kind of human being. When they allowed him to take it, like during the Rockhold fight and the Bisping fight, dude, his body ate it up. He was doing it legally.
He was doing it legally.
Yeah.
He got permission from the UFC to do it in the commission.
I share all my tests, all my exams with them. I never hide anything from anybody. I got approval by UFC, by the commission.
So when the UFC realized they had made a mistake, Vitor returned to the cage as a shell of his former self, taking on Chris Weidman and looking like he had aged 10 years.
If you look at Vitor when I fought him, he looked like a cross between a powerlifting champion and the Incredible Hulk. When he stepped in against Chris Weidman, he looked like somebody's out of shape, middle-aged man, like a dad that went to the gym once a week. I have no respect for that guy whatsoever. I think he's a piece of is what I think.
Unfortunately, he was never quite the same fighter after that. James Krause's suspension. James Krause, the former UFC fighter turned acclaimed coach, is currently involved in an ongoing scandal unlike anything the sport has ever seen before at this level. Something very odd happened when a fight involving Derek Minner, who happens to be coached by James Krause, started to take on quite a lot of last-minute bets.
In the hours leading into that fight, there was some heavy bets placed on Nerdonbeek to win the fight, to win in the first round.
Bookmakers were really surprised by how much money was bet on this kind of undercard fight, and not only how much it was bet, but how often. It just kept getting bet. No matter what they moved the odds to, people were betting it, as one bookmaker said, like they knew the result.
As it turned out, Minner was injured, and his leg gave out almost immediately in round one. Was it a coincidence that many people became very rich off of this exact prediction? Well, no. As it turned out, Krause was proud owner of a very successful Discord server for fight betting.
James Krause is also someone who ran his own Discord. He charged people to bet with him, to use his picks.
I have a Discord, like 2,000 members in it. I do pretty well. I make more money gambling on MMA than I do anything else.
Fights that you're involved in, will you bet on those too?
Yeah.
Wow, that's And though there was a lot of legitimate wisdom to be found here, Krause's entire place in the MMA world was called into question, and he was effectively blacklisted from the sport for sharing info with bettors and coaching his own fighters into bouts that they weren't healthy for.
We let these guys know not to bet on fights. Do you know what the outcome of this is? They're going to go to federal prison. Federal prison.
The Reebok deal. This one felt like a real gut punch to the entire UFC roster. Back in the day, fighters found their own sponsors for their shorts, and the payouts for these business partnerships was one of the biggest forms of income for the fighters, especially at the lower level. Sure, you would get some odd-looking shorts from time to time, but it was the best deal to keep the fighters afloat. However, when the Reebok deal came into play and the UFC banned custom shorts, bringing in their own uniforms with measly payouts per performance, they effectively hurt the earning potential of every single fighter on the roster.
This is a big deal right now in MMA that Reebok is the official sponsor for the UFC. Fighters can't have independent sponsors when they walk into the cage now, and financially it seems to be a huge disaster for the fighters.
I lost a lot of money with sponsors.
Talk about the Reebok deal. I know you caught some heat for that, right?
I don't know,
Doesn't that mean more money for the organization?
Don't get it. It's good for the industry. It's good for everybody. Is this thing going to be perfect right out of the gate? Oh, it's new. It's going to be a work in progress, but it's definitely a step in the right direction.
Unfortunately, this one just left a bad taste in everyone's mouths and has become one of the biggest controversies in the company's history. The UFC 229 Brawl. The UFC 229 headliner between UFC lightweight champion Khabib Nurmagomedov and the returning champion Conor McGregor sparked a feud that crossed every line in the book. Family, culture, religion, nothing was off the table, especially for Conor McGregor, and he did everything in his power to try to provoke a response from the Eagle.
I am going to truly love putting a bad beating on this little glass jaw rat. You say send location. Here it is right here in front of you. I'm right in front of you. Do something about it. Do something about it. Yeah, you'll do nothing.
Unfortunately for him, his attacks did not throw Khabib off his game on fight night.
I stay relaxed. I don't feel nothing. I'm come here for smash this guy.
And despite this being one of the most emotionally charged rivalries in MMA history, Khabib was thoroughly professional in the way he broke Conor down round by round. But when he finally forced the tap, a verbal onslaught from Conor's teammate Dillon Danis finally set Khabib over the edge. He leapt over the side of the cage, attacking Team McGregor head-on, while several members of his own team moved in to sucker punch Conor in the cage. It was an ugly scene, and worst of all, it came on by far and away the most watched UFC event of all time.
One of the most anticipated nights in UFC history, marred by a very ugly scene.
Been doing this for 18 years, the biggest night ever, and I couldn't be more disappointed.
That shouldn't have happened from Khabib's part. He should have took the victory, got the belt, walked away like a professional.
Khabib diving over was ridiculous. Nobody's ever done that. Nobody should ever do that.
Embarrassed Dana, embarrassed the UFC, embarrassed this sport.
Is this a bad night for the UFC?
It's a very bad night.
Sure, as time has gone on, the moment has become legendary and a real star-making night for Khabib. But this was truly an insane post-fight skirmish, the likes of which we will likely never see again.
I know this is not my best side. I don't understand how people can talk about I jump on the cage. What about he talk about my religion? He talk about my country. He talk about my father. He come to Brooklyn and he broke bus. He almost killed couple people. What about this?
If you guys enjoyed the video, please make sure to let us know by giving it a like and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a thing. As always, thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.